Hey everyone, and today we're going to be finally doing the full review on the Asus Zenith Extreme Alpha. So this is the new updated Zenith, because in reality the old one was starting to struggle with Threadripper 2. But could this even be ready for Threadripper 3? Now, we have already done a complete preview, which is available both on YouTube, or you can click the link underneath. And on the first page of the main review, we've put the preview video there where we've gone round and looked at all the specs and everything. We'll be popping the VRM heatsink off today, and I have done some extensive VRM testing for you to all look at as well. But if you are interested in any of more of the performance results, you can click through to the OC3D website, where you'll see all the other graphs and data and all of that sort of stuff. So, lots and lots of heatsink space at the top. Now, this is because of there are 16 power stages up at the top, which I will show you in a minute. And I'll also talk to you about what each of those power stages and everything means. But we do have a lot of RGB stuff around here, or RGB. We also do get an OLED panel at the back here, which you can use to display any number of different things that you could possibly want. You do need to remember, with a big Threadripper board like this, if you're going to be giving it a big Threadripper CPU, there are two 8-pins at the top. Now, you do need those to get it to run. So that is something that you do need to keep in mind. There are lots of, well, you've got 8 SATAs down the side, should you need them. You've got a big water cooling area at the bottom as well, should you need it. And if you pop this section off, you've got your M.2s hidden underneath, but you can also use the DIMM.2 area up here. Again, I have done a full preview just looking at the board. It's like 15 minutes just to actually look at all the bits and bobs. So if you want a more in-depth look to show you where the addressable RGBs are and where the normal RGB pins are and all of the fan headers and all of that sort of stuff, go and have a look at that video. But that's really going to be for those of you that are actually interested in buying it. Round the back, the only real interesting thing, other than the fact there are an awful lot of USBs around here, is the fact that there are 2 Ethernets. Now, one of them is 10G, so 10 GBE. But what you do need to remember is if you connect that 10 GB port, you're going to need a decent Cat5e, but I personally use Cat6 or 7. And then you're going to need to connect that 10G port into other things that are 10 GBE as well. So if you've got a switch, it's going to need 10 GBE's ports on the switch. If you're going to have a home network and it's going to go into, say for argument's sake, a NAS or a home server, that's going to need 10 GB as well. If you connect anything on this up to something that's 2.5 GB or just a normal 1 gigabit, then this will run at 1 gigabit as well. Now, a lot of people will instantly say, well, the 10 GBE speed up my internet. It's hardly likely that you're ever going to have internet that's going to be going over a gigabit. I mean, even with the people that are on Google Fiber are only on 1 gigabit. So with this, for 99% of us out there, this is all about internal home networking. So if you were going to run this into a switch, like I said, you need a 10 GBE switch. Then you also need a 10 GBE add-in card or motherboard in your server or your NAS to be able to get everything hooked up and working correctly. If you do get it all hooked up and working correctly, you can have, I've had personally, up to 1.1 gigabytes a second transfer across. Now, with a normal 1 gigabit, I normally get 119 megabytes a second, 120 megabytes a second across the network. So going up to 10 GB is giving me about 9 times, nearly 10 times more possible bandwidth. So for transferring large files, like video files, onto a server for safe storage and, you know, possible future use, this is absolutely brilliant. And if any of you are into home networking and that sort of stuff, this will really open things up for you. But with a board like this, it's mainly going to be about the fact that it's like a workstation and being able to transfer massive files to other places on your network. But you do just need to keep in mind that the other places on your network need to be as quick as this as well. Otherwise, this will be bottlenecked by the slower parts. So with the board completely naked, what we can see across the top here, the smaller chips at the top are the PAL LR stage MOSFETs, and they're 16 and they are IR3555 PAL IR stages, each rated to be able to handle 60 amps. And then you do, just below them, get the well, they call them high permeability alloy core choke, rated to handle 45 amps. But when we bring up the kind of the diagram, essentially what they've done, normally you'd get doublers. You get the PWM, then goes into a doubler, and then that is then wired out into the MOSFET and the choke with the driver. So with the Alpha, it's hardwired into the MOSFET, and you don't actually have a doubler at all. It makes you kind of wonder, did it need it? What was the point of it? A lot of people were actually kind of against doublers and didn't like calling them phases. And with these, Asus do actually call it a power stage rather than a phase. But something that I did want to show you just quickly, because obviously you've already seen that you have the PWM, then you get the IR3555 power stage. Now I've already told you this is the 3555 power stage. So what that does mean is the MOSFETs are actually round the back of the board. Now I got the best picture that I could do of the MOSFETs for you, but one of the things, as you've already seen around the back of the board, you did get this massive heatsink, which I had to pull off. You can see two of the MOSFETs aren't cooled. Now I don't necessarily think they've well, I suppose they could have cooled them if they wanted to, but I think these 6 MOSFETs here are there to be able to feed the CPU, and I think the other 2 must be for like the SoC stuff and things like that. So that does mean you're probably, because I've not been able to get an answer of it, I think these, because of the way it's designed on the other side, there are going to be 12 power stages for the CPU, and then you're going to have the other 4 power stages for other things, and that's why this one hasn't got any direct contact cooling on it. And in reality, they could have done it very, very easily, and or it could have had like an extra little bit coming over from the back plate, or it could have, oh no, get it the right way around, Tom. It could have had a little bit further down here. There are lots of ways that they could have done it should it have needed it. And we didn't run into any specific cooling problems, as I'll show you later on, because we have done quite a bit of testing on the board itself with it. It's also worth noting just quickly that we did pull the entire heatsink assembly off. Now you do get the 2 40mm fans just nestled in there, but there is also a rather large heatsink around the back. But the only thing that it actually comes into contact with is the chip for the 10GBE. They can get pretty toasty, but there is a heat pipe which connects the main VRM heatsink into this rear section, and obviously this is all aluminium, so it's a lot of material there to help keep everything cool. But the actual thing that that large heatsink at the side is actually cooling is this 10GBE chip. But obviously because of the heat pipe, it's extra material, and as you'll see in a minute, the VRM temps do work quite well, so maybe the heat pipe does. So a brief look at the test bench and an explanation in why we've kind of done it this way, because it is a bit unorthodox. Now with the Lanley test bench that we're using, it has got a plastic cover on the top, and we did have a combination of fans in the bottom, no fans in the bottom. But the reason why we used it this way was, in all honesty, I was really trying to trip the board up, because it does give us options in that we can, if we want to, mount this 360mm IIO, and it does give us 2 good solid fans around the other side. Now this means that we can set it up so that we can have it exhausting or intaking to simulate the sort of airflow that you would get from the top of the case onto the VRMs of the board. But also what it does give us the flexibility to be able to do is pretty much remove any airflow from around that area. Now all we do have to do if we completely want to remove it is take the fan cables out from the bottom, and then what we can do is take the AIO out that way, and this doesn't correlate very well onto video, but we can take it out, and then essentially, what am I caught on? There we go. Right, so we can then, and then put the AIO out the other side. So then, what it then does is it means we can completely remove the bulk of airflow from the top of the board entirely. Now this is very unfair to the board, considering that we are running a 2990WX in there. We will be doing full manual overclocks, fixing all the core speeds manually as well, so they can't dance around like they would do with Precision Boost Overdrive. And we have also got some 3400 megahertz memory going on in here as well to really kind of stretch the legs of everything. And I will talk to you about VRM temps, but I just did want to show you the extremes that we went to try and make it not happy. And then, just in case you are wondering, just the normal rig that we would use is a 980 for the graphics card, but we are using a 1500 watt power supply in the bottom just to make sure that we are getting more than enough power possible into the board to feed the overclock and keep everything happy, to try and really push those all of those 32 cores to the maximum that we possibly could do. Now, when it came to overclocking, like I said, we do go on we really do try to max the boards out completely. So essentially we go for a fixed clock across all of the cores, and we don't use Precision Boost Overdrive, because if you use Precision Boost Overdrive, it can adapt the cores, and you will get a better sustained boost than you would normally, but we fix ours across the whole range. Now, for a 2990WX to be doing 4 gigahertz, that was previously like the absolute kind of limit to the board. We did then sometimes get a 4.025 running and could pass a few tests, but really the limitation with the clocks at this point, because we have tried with the Meg before, the MSI Meg Creation, it was literally the limit of the silicon that we had. Now, the Zenith did allow us to go a little bit further, which was 4.05, but that wasn't 100% stable at that point, and it was mainly kind of blender that was falling over because it's such a consistent, long and harsh bench. So we did end up settling at 4 gigahertz, which is pretty much the same as we did with all of the others. But like I do need to stress, that is a silicon limit with our actual CPU rather than a board limitation. We did also go above 3200 megahertz with the memory, and we did manage to get 33 running relatively easily, and we could even get 34 running as well. But at that point, the scores for the memory actually start to tail off a little bit, which is again indicative of the settings that we got with the previous, or this kind of stuff that we got with the previous Zenith, and again the Meg Creation. So again, those kind of things are a limitation of the CPU itself. But really what I would say this board about is those VRM temps, or those VRMs. And I've spoken to you about the technical stuff before, but it's, I genuinely, the VRMs on these, they just don't get hot. Even with a full-blown manual overclock, they just didn't get hot. And the little fans on the top are set to start to spin at 60 degrees, and we never saw them spin, even though that we were, moving all the bulk of the possible airflow out the way to try and get the board to trip up. What I was actually trying to do at that point was be really nasty, and I wanted to see when the fans would spin, because I wanted to be able to hear how loud they were, and they just didn't do it. Now, that in itself is a bit crazy. Below 60 degrees VRMs with a manual 4 gigahertz 2990WX is just a little bit nuts. Some of the other in the graph that I've shown you, you'll be able to see that some of them look a bit better. But one of the things that we did with the Gigabyte, for example, is we had fans all over the place just to try and keep it cool, and we kind of called it like batshit mode, but it was FFE, and it was fans flipping everywhere, and that was, we have fans underneath, fans all over the place, and that's what we had to do to get some of those boards to take the 2990WX and have a max overclock. The original Zenith was the same, for example. We had to have FFE, fans, bleep, everywhere, and that would have included round the back, all over the VRMs, because with the old Zenith, what you need to remember, so I've kind of said it already, and that was it was designed for the original Threadripper, so it could do a manual overclock just about with the 16 core and max it out, but then when you smash it up to 24 and 32 cores, it just couldn't do it without just gallons of airflow. The VRMs themselves were more than capable of feeding the CPU enough, but it needed gallons and gallons more cooling to be able to keep that little heatsink at the top cool. And it was one of the reasons why when I reviewed the 2990WX, I said if you're going to be running a Zenith, you really needed like a full cover EK water block to be able to keep the board kind of at a point that it's not going to be getting stressed and getting too warm. This completely the opposite, to the point where it's so cool with a 2990WX. It's pretty much like Asus knew that they kind of got caught a little bit short with the last one, so they've over-engineered this one, and it does make me wonder whether Asus know that there are going to be much more cores coming in the future. I mean, there are rumours about Threadripper 3 being 48 cores. And if that's the case, it does make you wonder whether, I mean, I still don't like the fans on this. So if those fans do start to spin at 60 degrees, I might be changing fan profiles. And I might even be disconnecting it and maybe like trying to make sure that my case has a little bit more airflow instead. Because normally 40 degrees fans are never ever going to be, 40mm fans are never going to be that quiet, for example. But it does make me wonder whether they've designed and engineered this to be slightly more future-proof, in that, yes, the board's already out in the market, but it's going to be quite sweetly placed if AMD go Threadripper 3 and then let's say it's the 3990WX and it's got 48 cores, and then you kind of hope that then this might be able to keep the VRMs below 100 degrees at that point, and with a manual overclock and 48 cores and completely maxed out, I think that would be amazing. But it would at that point be kind of, I think, why they've kind of gone that route with this. Now, we have done a lot more testing that you can see on the OC3D website. Obviously, we've got like Blender results on there, and we've got other synthetic benchmarks and that sort of stuff that you can go and have a look, and we have had graphs popped up. But the bulk of the testing is all over there. This video, I did kind of really want to focus on like the points on the board with the 10 GBE, for example, but mainly kind of go into the specifics of testing the VRMs, because in reality, I wasn't expecting them to be this cool. Now, obviously, I've spoken to you about 10 GBE and that the rest of your network needs to be kind of like specs up for it to kind of accept it, because obviously if you plug it into just a normal 1 gigabit router, you're only going to get 1 gigabit speeds, or even a 1 gigabit switch. So you do need to kind of make sure you have already or are going to invest in the other kit around it. But as far as a workstation is concerned, and yes, I know it's a workstation and it's a pretty workstation and it's got all the flashy like bits on it as well. But if you were going to build something, a workstation that was going to look really nice, was going to be future-proof, you know, maybe 3000 series thread, or it would be 3000 series Threadripper later. The VRMs on this are absolutely amazing, but it is also going to mean, even if you buy a 2000 series Threadripper, whether it be either of the WXs, because I think you kind of need it for this, but either the 2970 or the 2990WX, even with a full-blown massive overclock, you're not going to have to worry about the VRMs, and you only then get to the point where you're then worrying about how you're actually going to cool it. Now, we do use the Cooler Master 360mm TR4 cooler, but the fans that come with it don't really spin up very much. So if you are going for, you know, down the kind of territory that we are with benchmarking and like very long sustained benches, or even very long sustained, say for argument's sake, like a video render or a Blender run, for example, then you're going to know that you're going to need to spin the fans up a little bit, and the fans that come with it just aren't really enough, which is why we use the ML fans, and they're normally running at about 2000 RPM when we're doing our benchmarks for this. So keep that in mind. That's a really good idea. But if you are going to go manual full-blown insane overclock, I would probably say that for the 2990WX, water is going to be the way forward. Especially for those long consistent. With Precision Boost Overdrive, if you just smash some of the settings up a little bit and you're willing to let the clocks move around a little bit more, then you don't necessarily need to worry about full water or this. I mean, you can get away with using the Threadripper cooler, but then you do need to watch your temps very carefully. I'd say with the 2990WX that you probably are still going to need an AIO or a massive air cooler. But the 2970WX and below, you'll be able to get away with that Cooler Master Threadripper style, you know, big chunky cooler. But it's really going to come down to what you want to do with your benches and stuff. But with the Zenith, it's a shame that it took them so long. But it was very, very much needed because the other one was starting to struggle with the amount of cores that are available now with the bigger Threadrippers, and it would have also then been completely obsolete with the new ones. So as far as this is concerned, I would say it's an enthusiast award for the board, and it's a really good thing that they've kind of done it, and they've added, it's nice to have also seen, and I do think they do need to get props. I have reviewed the Rampage Omega on the website, but as far as the Zenith Alpha is concerned, it's nice to see that they are so very closely designed and spec'd so that you do have a matching Intel and an AMD version, which like I said, I do think they need props for, because I don't think anybody else has really done it. There isn't kind of a proper Meg insane version. But then again, I suppose with the Meg, you need to remember that it's the AMD one, which is the insane one. So I suppose that is kind of nice. Anyway, that's my thoughts on that. It's pretty much well, as far as the Asus is concerned, you know, it's the best Threadripper board that they do, and its only real competition in the market at the moment that I'm aware of, at least, is the Meg Creation, and the VRM temps on this do definitely tip in Asus's favour because they are completely over-engineered. So it's really going to come down to where your brand alliances lie and, you know, what you're trying to achieve. But all of that information is there for you to decide. And if I'm all honest, I'm actually looking forward to seeing if we do get lots more cores with Threadripper 3, if and when it does ever come, because that's going to be the time that this board actually gets stressed, because at the moment it's almost twiddling in its thumbs with the current gen stuff, and that kind of does give you a good base for if you were going to be buying this and hoping you might be able to use it for a good few years yet. So I'll leave that with you. Let me know your thoughts underneath. Don't forget you can click through to the Overclocked 3D website if you want to go and have a look at all the rest of the graphs. We've got the forums over there as well. And then don't forget, we do still have, if you look for Tiny Tom Logan on Instagram, you can find me there, and on Twitter as well, and on Facebook, all of the socials. Anyway, this has been the tiniest one. I hope you have all had an amazing Easter, but for now at least, this is Tiny Tom Logan out. Ding!